Welcome everybody to the Haunted Hacker podcast, birthday edition. So today is my 48th birthday. I feel like I'm still 25. Look like I'm 60, but that's okay. I'm good with that. So a little bit of news. I'm speaking for ICE in January, speaking in South Africa in January, and my first screenplay just got recorded and on video, and it comes out early in the spring with Alyssa Knight, and working on my second screenplay for another company. So it should be good times. Tonight we have Chase Cunningham, and he has a really interesting background, and I'll let him talk about his background. And other than that, let's kick it off. Chase, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast tonight. I looked over your background and looked at some of the amazing things that you've done and you continue to do. And it looks like a huge contribution to the industry as a whole, which is really awesome to see, especially when, in some areas the industry really lacks and really suffers. So why don't you give us a little bit of background and tell us about yourself and your journey?
Sure. So joined the Navy at 17. Actually joined as a diesel mechanic, and found out really quickly that I didn't like checking the same oil on the same piece of machinery 700 times to make sure that there was still oil in it. And luckily, through a set of fortuitous circumstances, cross-rated over to CT. And after I did that, I got medically retired from the Navy in 2012-ish. Wound up working a bunch for the federal government after that, specifically in classified space. And then worked my way over to Forrester Research, and ultimately where I'm at right now at Aerocom Software. So I mean, I've been through the ringer on I was doing information assurance back when it was IA before it was cyber.
Yeah, I remember the IAVAs that used to come out. We'd have to respond to those all the time. Pretty interesting stuff. Yep. So what was your first rate again? I didn't catch that.
I was an EN, an engineman.
Oh, and then what was your crypto rate?
CTR.
CTR, cool. Yeah, I was a CTT, and then I switched from T branch to the Navy's new cyber warfare rate, the CTN.
Yeah, I was an R, but I basically did N stuff the whole time. I just never converted over because promotion was better as an R. So
yeah, and back then when I first got into N, they didn't even have a school for it. You basically sat for a board and they asked you a bunch of questions and either yay or nay. So tell me, in your time during the Navy, what was your favorite part of doing crypto?
I mean, I thought the most interesting part for me was just the way that we did mission, and the way that you were, it was always interesting to me to be like, getting actual valuable stuff and putting it in the hands of the people that needed it to do kinetic operations. I mean, that was just always crazy to me to be like, someone would need something and you just kind of go, okay, I'll go get it, and then you bring it back and go, here's your intel.
Yeah, that, and then you see the outcome of the operation, which is really cool. And then going to school in Corey Station is one of my favorite parts of my military career. For those of you who don't know what Corey Station is, it's an intelligence command where they teach crypto techs and some other rates. But it's a old World War II airport or hangar, and the grinder is massive, and doing the runs on the grinder all the time. I spent some time there, and I spent some time at Little Creek with at the amphibious base with teams doing SWIC stuff, which is really cool. So what took you from being a chief in the Navy into the cyber industry? Was that a direct transition for you, or was there a period of time where you were just like trying to decide if that's really what you want to pursue, or how'd that go?
Well, I was lucky that when I was going to retire, a friend of mine who was a retired senior chief had a contract that was government cyber work, and he basically said, like, the day you get your papers, take the uniform off and put your civvies on and come work for me. And I did that contract with him for about a year, and it was just made the transition kind of easier. It's, people don't realize how much your life changes when you come out of the military and you've got to wrap your head around how to not be a chief and whatnot. So that was just great. And like I say, I mean, I think people think I'm joking, but I mean, my whole career has just been luckily through meeting really great people and having connections. And, it's not because I've done anything awesome. It's just people around me happen to be great.
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of the same way it went for me. I was at Joint Force Intelligence Command and was about to get out, and some guys from the GCCC over at USGFCOM picked me up as soon as I got out. Like, I literally didn't even have a day lapse between, Navy and civilian. And I thought that was really cool. They sweep us up pretty quick, and I hadn't retired, but what I found was when I went to Bethesda and went to the job fair there, and realized that I could take my clearance, my experience, and make like 4 times as much. It was really hard for me to look that in the face and stay in the military. So I got out pretty quick, but I did a total of 13 years. But yeah, I mean, there's so much value in what we're trained, and some of it doesn't directly translate to civilian work. But fortunately, with all of the stuff that we learn in crypto and on the job, it works out really well. And for those of you listening who are contemplating going into the military or looking for a way to get into cyber, best way I found to get into cyber is go in the military, and it will teach you everything you need to know plus more. And it's a good environment. T branchers and CTs in general get treated a little bit differently than the rest of the Navy. We don't put in a lot of elbow grease, and people tend to let us get on the ship first and off the ship first. And it's a different lifestyle, I think, working in the skiff. How did you enjoy working in the skiff?
Oh, I love the skiff because it was always great to be in that place where you had no one could kind of bother you. I mean, you were plugged in, but you were unplugged, and because you can't even take your cell phone in there, right? And it was also fun doing some of the closed access stuff where the CEO would be like, "I need to know what you're doing there." You'd be like, "Nope, sorry," and you shut the door in her face, like you don't need to know, so go away.
Yeah, that was pretty interesting to me too. The fact that a lot of our missions that I worked on were for the NSA and not for the Navy. And you could tell there were some people that were ship's company that were really kind of perturbed about, guys coming on and jumping off really quick and then just not having to, stand watch or anything like that. But we did our own watch inside the skiff, which was different. And they didn't see that.
Watch is long, 12 hours on, 12 hours a day is long, especially when you're sitting there with, cans on and whatever else.
Yeah. Well, what was really cool is, like, I heard from other people that had been stationed on ships as CTs that, sometimes the skiff or even, the berthing, it was no big surprise to see like an Xbox or a PlayStation going. A lot of guys entertain themselves that way. But, I didn't spend much time on a ship. Most of my time was catching a taxi over there and back, and really short trips, direct support for different groups. So when you got into cybersecurity after the military, what was the hardest part for you to transition to and from? For me, it was just the knowing what to predict, routine, structure, and then going to a commercial workplace where you didn't really know what was going to happen next.
I think the hardest part for me initially was realizing like you can't approach it the same way you did in the military. In the military, especially if you're staff NCO and above, you say something and it's going to happen. And I mean, if it doesn't happen, you have a recourse that's usually pretty I guess you'd call it vicious. And in the civilian world, it just doesn't work that way. You have to dial it back, learning how to do politics, learning how to kind of be a normal sort of job civilian side is not an easy thing when you've come out of, like you said, the structure and the attitude of getting things done. I think the hardest part for me was learning how to wait.
Yeah, definitely. They always said, though, Navy is standby to standby most of the time. But when it wasn't standby to standby, it was full speed ahead and high intensity. And I think that in the industry that we're in now, a lot of that accountability isn't there. Definitely a lot of the structure, I think, is lacking in some places. And I miss the camaraderie. So, you get a little bit of that in the industry, and I've been in it for 20 plus years and made some really good friends and a very small group of core people who've been around for a very long time. But other than that, you don't really gain that camaraderie. And it's hard to tell, like, you meet someone at work and in the Navy, I know the guy sitting next to me's got my back. But in the commercial world, it's not always like that. So I do miss that. So being a civilian, what is your, I guess, most exciting part of your job, or what have you done that really makes you stop and say, I really dig being in cybersecurity?
I mean, I think that this is, in my opinion, the most important sector in technology right now. I mean, if you think about it, we're seeing implications that are global in nature. I mean, cyber work is literally doing things that are helping either, bring national level capability up, or in some cases down. I mean, I think that the stuff that we do matters, and that's the best part of any job, if you ask me, is like, money will take care of itself, but doing something that actually matters, that's more important. The mission, the doing things that are, I mean, we're engaged in, I guess you could call it combat in some ways.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't understand that. So this cyber war is not something new. It's been around for many years. We've been fighting on many fronts for a long time. It's just that the civilian world just didn't know what we were doing. And another thing too is I hear in the industry people pointing fingers at different countries and engaging in cyber war and stuff like that. But what they don't understand is every country's involved. It's not just Russia. It's not just China. It's the U.S. It's Brazil. It's all over the place, and they don't understand that. If something happens, the first thing in most people's minds, and most security companies, is it Russia? Is it China? Is it North Korea or Iran? But they don't take into I guess they don't take into consideration the whole geopolitical tension between different countries bleeds out. There's a whole geopolitical factor that goes into cybersecurity that I don't think a lot of people get, and a lot of companies don't have a grasp on. And I think once we understand how geopolitics plays into cybersecurity and different economies, I think that we'll be able to get a better handle on controlling some of that theater and some of that risk.
Yeah, I mean, I do a lot of work on Capitol Hill, and I mean, those folks up there are starting to get the point that this stuff is real, and it's not just a bunch of chicken littles running around screaming about it. I mean, there's every time there's a ransomware attack that is significant, it gets eyebrows up. I think we're seeing some action from the current administration that's actually useful, but like you say, it's I remind people of that too. Like I tell them, I said the U.S. is an APT. Everybody talks about Russia and China, whatever. It's like, yeah, we do the same stuff. I mean, we're just better at keeping it out of the news.
Right. I got interviewed for a job at Pro Systems one time, and I wasn't really sure what the role was. I needed a job and thought, I'll go check it out. So they called me in for an interview, and they take me into the malware development lab. And I thought, wait a minute, why is Pro Systems involved in creating malware? And then I realized, I put the two and two together, and I realized that Lockheed Martin also had a malware creation lab. And it's all contributing to the cyber war and the cyber theater. So there's a lot of that goes on. And it's really interesting when you look at it from different points of view. I've talked to FBI. I've talked to former CIA agents, a guy that was in the CIA doing technical stuff. And everybody has a different opinion, but what's funny is all those agencies still have the same, I guess, idea about the whole holistic picture, is that, as long as we have geopolitical tension, that cyber war is not going to stop anytime soon.
The spear. I mean, I think now, I mean, that's how the Cold War didn't go cold. It just went digital.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. And when you look at Cuba, Cuba's been messing around with the infrastructure just recently, and that's a direct hit from what we were doing with down in Cuba. And we got a little upset when people were getting the Havana syndrome. And Cuba's been playing that cat and mouse game for a really long time. So tell me about your website. I saw your website, and I saw some stuff terrible. You do, but it's not. It's
I haven't put any work into it. It's so bad, but it's on my list of things to do.
but what you do behind that website is really interesting and really beneficial. Why don't you explain to us kind of about that whole area of your life and what you're doing there?
Well, I mean, I do a lot of work in I do a lot of pro bono stuff in cyber, but I'm really trying on the far end of it, like my podcast and the books and stuff, is really just to kind of keep it as honest as I possibly can, usually to a fault, and then just getting that in front of folks who I think, care, and listen. I get a lot of positive feedback about not taking money from vendors and pushing stuff as far as the truth of what's going on. So I mean that's a pretty core focus for me, and I don't plan on changing that at any time. I mean, I think the last time I was looking at stuff, it was a few thousand folks listen regularly, which is good.
That's really good. I've been working with TechStrong for a year now. They host the podcast on their TV show, Digital Anarchist. And I think that, once you get that reach, it's really important to be that transparent, straightforward, no bullshit. This is what's going on. And, just like anything else, some people will enjoy it. Some people, won't. And, there'll be naysayers and stuff like that. But, it doesn't stop me. I still do what I believe in. And I think that's really important in this industry is don't sell out and, just be who you are and try to give back. And that's kind of the gist of this podcast, of that, and give a history on cyber so that later on down the road, there's a legacy that they can pick up and watch the video and say, oh, this is what it was like back then, because there's a lot of kids coming in now that don't necessarily know what happened, in 2006 or 2005 as far as cyber goes. And I kind of want to leave a record. So tell me about your podcast. I haven't got a chance to listen to that yet, but I'm really interested.
Yeah, it's a Dr. Zero Trust, basically. And I mean, I kind of keep it revolving between, I try and cover the news when there's significant news. I was doing the news every week, and then I was like, well, probably a little too much, just on, there's so much moving parts. And by the time I could do analysis and whatever, I couldn't keep up. So I'm doing it like every other week. But then I do have a lot of guests on there too that are just anybody and everybody that I can and is willing to talk with me. I mean, I've had salespeople on there. I've had generals. I've had folks that work on Capitol Hill. Just whoever wants to talk about something that's valuable that someone else might get some value about, and as long as they're willing to be honest, then I'll bring them on. And I think that's I'm proud of that because it's as real as I can be.
Yeah. Who's been your most interesting guest you had
on? Gosh, I think I had a lot of really good conversation with a friend of mine who's a Chinese cyber analyst, works for Recorded Future. Her stuff was really useful, and she was able to kind of walk through how they're looking at the initiatives that China is taking. And I mean, because she's an expert in that space, just her knowledge of it is so vast, it's super useful.
Yeah, I find that some of the guests that I have on, I always learn something from the guests that I have on, every single one of them. And I think that's really important too, is I try to get people who are either more experienced than I am or have more, I guess, intense or interesting story. And someone who wants to get out there and put their name out there and help people. But I think one of my more interesting ones was I had to get up really early in the morning one time and speak to a retired IDF cyber warfare leadership from Israel, and Dr. Orrin Eaton. And it was a really interesting conversation, really eye-opening to hear his stance on cyber war and the U.S. and Israel's connection and relationship was really interesting.
Really, they don't play. They don't.
No, they don't. The question about Stuxnet naturally came up, and there was some odd silence that went on, but it was really, really interesting. So, where do you see cybersecurity going in the next, let's say, 10 years? I don't want to say 5 years because ransomware is just going to continue. So let's look past ransomware. Do you think we'll get past that part, or do you think it'll evolve into something more dangerous?
I think it's going to evolve into more sort of multifaceted problems. Like it's kind of a singular issue right now. And honestly, you know, I tell people all the time, like ransomware shouldn't be the problem it is. Like it's usually because you have pretty crappy basic security and you're not doing the things that will, you know, you're relying on antivirus when ransomware doesn't care about antivirus. It invokes stuff that's native to the operating system. So your AV is not going to catch it. So stop. You know, I think that's part of the problem, but I think that it's going to continue to evolve as it goes forward. I think we're going to see more kind of combined attack vectors where you'll have you know, social media is going to play into that, and you're going to have an evolution of those things as the avenues of delivery for the new stuff. And it's more technology is not a good thing right now. We do so much speed that the speed feeds this beast, and it doesn't get any better anytime soon. I mean, the good thing for those of us in cyber is we're not going to be unemployed.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, I think, you know, I've been doing a lot of incident responses lately, and I put out a post on LinkedIn, I guess it was yesterday, and the 5 common denominators of ransomware and those types of events. And I mean, when you look at the people who are getting hit and the problems that are existing, they're not much different than 10 years ago. People still don't patch. People still don't update. People still don't communicate. And I think as an industry, if we want to defeat a problem like ransomware, there's going to have to be more honesty. People are going to have to come out when they get breached and say, hey, this is what happened. This is the lessons we learned. This was our failure, and this is how we got out of it, in order to pass that knowledge to other companies that may be threatened by that same type of ransomware attack. But as an industry, we're so critical about, we don't want anybody to see how ugly our baby is, that, you know, we don't want to reach out and help people. And I think a prime model for that was why I went into the military the second time was 9/11. And that was a communication failure and intelligence failure. And I think that as an industry, we suffer from that same problem on a daily basis.
Yeah, I mean, the other issue that I have too is we've created this self-licking ice cream cone of misery, right? Where people continue to rely on things that aren't dealing with, I mean, I think about it like the physics of the problem. Like it drives me bonkers that there's this giant marketing massive effort and money being made around training people out of, you know, clicking stuff. I think it's a waste. I think it's counter to what actually makes a difference. The data says that I'm not wrong. Like the same people continue to just click stuff. So, you know, you could glue their hands to the table and they'll click it with their nose. So I think that those types of things are problems in the industry, and it's only gonna, it only perpetuates the actual issue. You know, you need a technical control. I can't rely on people not to be people. And I mean, when your job is to be online and to interact with content, but I'm going to train you not to interact with content, like, come on.
Right. The whole idea of telling people don't click on something, and then you as a company send out mass amounts of emails asking people to click on links. I mean, it kind of defeats the whole purpose, you know. It's like the blind leading the blind.
Yeah, it's asinine, but I mean, there's this massive I mean, there's what are they? There's a couple of $billion valuation companies out there, and that's what they do. And it's like, you might as well have taken that $1 billion and flushed it.
Yeah, and like Proofpoint was supposed to be the solution to that, and Mimecast, but I don't see that solving anybody's problems. I worked with both platforms for a while, and the attackers know that this technology exists, and more than likely, 1 or 2 of those groups have worked for those companies, you know, and so they know the controls and they know how to get around them. And I try to explain to people, it's not a technology problem. The technology, we can solve that problem or that issue easily. You know, we can defeat different measures, but we can't remold the way people think. And really, it's a people problem. You know, the computers do well on themselves, but the people, you let them go and they create chaos.
Yeah, and I mean, the other issue I have is that there's like, I get it and I agree, you should train your people. Like, we need to know, just like I need to know how to be safe when I drive my car, but I don't need to know necessarily how an internal combustion engine works to get in the car and go somewhere. There's safety controls in there that are built in that will hopefully save me if something bad happens. We have this dumb way of approaching it, where we think we can make everybody into a cybersecurity person, and then we go, well, I don't want to hurt their feelings if I put a block on them on the internet. Like, no, I'm protecting my business. If you're Johnny or Sally clicks a lot, then I'm putting controls in front of you, whether you like it or not. It's not mean. It's not meant to hurt their feelings. It's because I don't want you taking my business down.
Right. And I'll tell you who's probably one of the most guilty in an environment, in a corporation, of that same thing is the C-suite, especially especially the CEO. You tell him that you're going to block him, and it becomes an issue. And they have the most wide open connection, and they're usually the ones who attract the negativity as far as threats and risk go.
Yeah, I interviewed with a pretty big company to be their CISO, and part of my interview was like, I said, well, can I come out there and kind of see how you do things? And after 5 days of walking around and seeing how they run stuff and telling them what I wanted to put in place, and they were like, well, I don't think we could do that. I said, I'm not taking your job. I mean, and it was a really nice, pay bump for me, but I was like, no, you're not crucifying me because you can't do your stuff. I mean, if you don't put controls in place, then I'm not going to be your CISO.
Yeah, that's crazy. And I see that quite a bit. I was interviewing for a position, I guess about a year ago, and I had a meeting with the CISO, and this guy had not read my resume, had not done searching on the internet, any OSINT, trying to figure out who I was, and strictly just had no clue. And before the interview, I went to his social media. I looked at everything. I looked at what school he went to, what sports he played, who his friends were, who his family was. I knew everything about this guy, but he didn't even take a minute to read my resume. And to me, that was game over, because if you don't take a minute to read somebody's resume before an interview, and you're the CISO, I'm not going to follow you, because chances are you're going to rely on everybody else to do everything, and you're just going to sit back and basically be a figure. And I look at CISOs like that are just holding spaces, like the same people on Capitol Hill have been there for 30, 40 years and done nothing.
Yeah, it's like I said, I do so much consulting on Capitol Hill that there are the people there that I do run into, and that they'll be like on one of the subcommittees around technology and cyber, and it's like, you folks don't know this from metaphysics, and why are you the one writing this legislation? I went round and round with a senator on drone security, and he just could not understand that his legislation didn't make a lick of difference. Like, it's a law. And his point on the defensive side of it was, well, we have laws that say that you can't do that. And I was like, yes, but technology, what technically stops me from doing it? Right. There's laws that say I can't speed too, but I speed.
Exactly. Back in 2008, they did a documentary called Hackers Are People Too. And I was interviewed for that documentary, and there's a segment on EFF and cyber law. And one of my comments, but even back in 2008, was the wrong people are making the legislation and the laws regarding cyber. They're old guys on Capitol Hill that have never touched technology, don't understand the technology, but yet are writing the bills and the legislation for that technology. And not much has changed. I don't think, looking at the way the government works, yeah, they've made some advances, but they're very slow and very small. I was talking to Jack Scott a couple of weeks ago, and they were talking about a reform that would require people to disclose breaches within 72 hours.
Yeah.
And it's like that does nobody any good. Like, that's past the point. It's already gone. But at least they're looking at ways to make the ecosystem better, the cyber ecosystem. But as far as infrastructure goes, I think Obama said it during his administration: an attack on the infrastructure is a declaration of war. And so far, I have not seen anybody pick up a rifle and go to town over any of the infrastructure yet. And I know it's been hit. I think Israel is the only one who has really done a kinetic attack based on the cyber attack. Yeah.
I thought that was, like, the Israelis, man, they don't play.
No, I thought that was pretty epic. I was like, wow, they researched where the hack came from and the traffic, and confirmed it, and then just annihilated the whole building. Like, yeah. I mean, that sends a message,
Yeah. I mean, if you approach, well, what's the nuclear side is mutually assured destruction. I think in the cyber side, if you're taking actions that are going to cause, national infrastructure outages and affect economies and life as well, I'm perfectly fine with sending a JDAM into a building.
Absolutely.
If
Yeah,
as
I
long
think
as you know that's where it came from and you're validated and whatever else, drop it from 30,000 feet and call it an afternoon.
Yeah, I think that's what's going to have to happen in the future, because a lot of the, I guess, red APT groups are starting to band together. And, I saw that transition, about 5 or 6 years ago on the commercial side, where I started to see different APT groups start to band up together and work together. And this last IR I did, or a couple ago, I actually saw an APT group and a hacking group get together and hit a company. And I thought, that's really strange. So I started thinking about it. And this is my theory, is that now ransomware attacks that involve APT groups are more for intelligence gathering. The financial gain, yeah, they make it look like a ransomware attack. Yeah, they put up a number, but usually that's the group that helped them get in, controlling that, saying, hey, I want this much money for the ransom. But the APT group is just sitting there collecting data constantly. And I think that, some of the data that I saw passing by was not on the company itself, but on the individuals, which was really interesting. It's like back when China hit the VA and was looking at building dossiers of specific individuals. And I think that's still going on, but on a wider scale.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's I mean, the thing for the national organizations that are doing this is they have a great veil of the plausible deniability with the ransomware gangs. So, I mean, personality flaw, right? I always think like the bad guy. If I was them, I'd sure as hell be doing that, because it's a great way to do whatever you want and not get busted. And yeah, I'll finance your ransomware op as long as I get my intel on the back end.
Yeah, and there's a lot of those ransomware gangs now that are more like tech companies from Silicon Valley. I mean, they're set up call centers and everything. Buy the remote access tool and get access, and you get a problem, call the help desk.
Yeah, they have good help. They have good help desks.
Yeah, ones that actually answer the phone. But yeah, so that brings up some interesting conversation about where cyber is going, and the I guess the cyber war theater, and a lot of our weapons too, which I think is really interesting about how we're so concerned about space right now. And that's another battlefield that I think is going to erupt in the next 10, 15 years. Cyber actions in space. And the whole idea of Space Force, I think, was really interesting that they came out of the blue and wanted to form that along with the unmanned Air Force, I guess, shuttle. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think space is where kind of the future state war is going to be fought. I mean, because that's valuable real estate, even though it's not real estate, and then being able to fly over and have your ability to do intel and push your efforts where you want them is what warfare is all about. Yeah. And space is the last sort of spot where the rush is going on to get up there, and it's every nation that can is figuring out a way to get a capability in that space.
Oh yeah,
it just becomes the evolution of where warfare goes. You don't need to put boots on ground anymore. If I can do stuff from space, I can still influence things. You mentioned the future of cyber. I think it goes honestly a little bit cooler, but I think it becomes more of an influence game than an actual kinetic sort of operation. Like you win more that way.
Yeah, totally. And we were talking a couple podcasts ago about actively going after APTs and ransomware gangs. And when I say active, I mean like hackbacks and stuff like that. But even more so, like if they can identify an APT and an APT's area of operation and pin that down, why can't we have a paramilitary type of organization that has skills in that arena to physically go in and take care of that APT? That's one thing that escapes me, is the fact that we have these special forces, we have these special capabilities, but we're not deploying them like we should. And I'm not sure if that's a fear-based, I guess, decision, to not want to instigate it to the next level, or if we're just not ready for that type of warfare yet.
I mean, I think that the issue, from knowing the folks that I've known on the Hill, it's really that there is such a concern, and it's a valid concern, around the risk of getting it wrong, because false flag operations are a real thing. And if I know what I'm doing, I can sure make it look like the Iranians did it when it was actually the Russians, or vice versa, and whatever. And it's hesitant to do that type of op because of those issues. So I don't know when we're going to get to that stage. But then again, a lot of those things that are happening lately, they don't really bother to hide that much because they're not concerned about any, repercussions. I mean, what's the downside, really?
Yeah, there are no repercussions. And
Are you going to sanction me? Like, who cares about sanctions?
All that does is make them go after cryptocurrency. So,
Yeah,
we saw North Korea and China get sanctions, and all of a sudden they start hacking people's Bitcoin wallets and the blockchain. So, I mean, those have never really bothered anybody, sanctions. And that brings it to question. Another big topic is, so the internet is a global system, and we all reside on the internet. Why is it that we have people in different countries being prosecuted or not being prosecuted for the same cybercrime? In my eyes, I think we need more of an Interpol type situation, where it's a global court. They're the ones who issue the warrants. They're the ones who try the cyber criminals. That way we don't get into an arena where, well, that guy's from the GRU, or this hacker is in a country we can't touch. It's a global crime to me. And the US is looking at it as, well, you're offending us. No, you're offending the whole internet. So I think we need an internet court, like an Interpol type court for the internet.
I mean, I don't disagree with you, but then, those of us that have worked in those joint places, how much of an absolute shenanigan it is trying to get anything. I mean, it's bad enough to get anything done with just the US. You try and throw partners and everyone else in there, and it gets even more convoluted and becomes even more difficult. So I agree with you in theory. I think it's just so many moving parts, and having joint interagency, inter-country sort of collaboration is not a fun thing to be a part of.
Yeah, definitely not. Another thing too, like SpaceX is really interesting to me. And I just got a connection with the head of cyber for SpaceX. And I sat there and thought about it. When I saw his profile, and I saw what he did and how he started out in SpaceX and where he went to become, the director of security. And I started thinking, Elon Musk really has his shit together. And I think it's a mixture of his IQ plus working with government agencies that have kind of guided him to where they want him to go, which is really interesting. Like the International Space Station, I saw a documentary yesterday about ISS, and the question of, is it more of a research platform, or is it more of a military project or military command that will, show itself sometime in the next 20 years as being a multi-joint like task force for different countries for the security of space?
Well, I mean, the Russians already flexed a little bit on that when they accidentally sort of screwed up their satellite demolition that wound up sending junk and made them move the ISS on the fly. So that was, I think a lot of times we see stuff that comes over in the news and people go, oh, that's interesting. But in reality, like, there's flexing going on, and you should look at it as, was that a flex? And I think that's becoming more clear all the time.
Yeah. And you and I are both from the Navy, and I saw an incident where I think it was a frigate. It might've been a frigate, actually went off course and collided with another ship.
Mm.
And you and I both know how stringent, the GPS guidance and the mission coordinates are. And it's not something that, they easily fall off course and end up colliding with another ship. I mean, it's kind of hard to miss a huge Navy ship. My thought is that, even maritime is being affected, but nobody's talking a lot about it.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff going on with what's, the Taiwanese Strait, and One of my buddies that's a senior chief, he was on a ship that was out there in the strait, and he said they had a Chinese destroyer rolling right up on them. And he said they were at battle station. He's like, dude, we were 30 seconds away from starting something real. And they just wound up backing off. But I mean, those types of things they're calculated moves, and I think where we're at right now, just nationally, is that our adversaries see that we're in a weakened position because of COVID, and they're doing what they can to get away with it. And I mean, there's 175,000 troops on the border of Ukraine right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you have that going on, and you also have China wanting to grab Taiwan. And that's a concerted effort as well. Putin and China talked before this all started. It's no mystery about how they operate. And I don't think Yeah, I think they see us as weakened because of the pandemic, but I think even more so after January 6th, that they realize that our government is not singing like a professional choir right now, I guess.
Yeah, well, I mean, the whole last few years have continued to pile on top of themselves, and it doesn't seem like anything's really moving into a better place. And now, I mean, we're at the economically, right? This is what really concerns me, is the stock market's at an all-time high, but you don't have the people putting the money into the market to actually make that valuation real. So when does it crash? And I mean, that it has to happen. It's just, when.
Yeah, I think, with all the variants coming out, I can kind of foresee like a new variant coming out that's a little bit more lethal. And I think that will suck the air right out of the stock market. And people will be right back to where we were when the pandemic first came out, and people were losing jobs and homes, which is really unfortunate. I was actually in London when the pandemic hit. It hadn't reached the US yet, but we were on lockdown in London. I ended up catching it in London, and it was a different story over there. I turn on the TV over there and look at what's going on in the US, and it was like party central, spring break, and people on the beach partying. And in London, we were all locked down. Like, you could not leave the house. And they were very strict about that. And even
do it now.
yeah, exactly, right. And then you see Australia with the same issues that we had. They actually were fighting government on lockdown because I don't know who's looking out for our best interest anymore when it comes to guidance about health and those mandates coming from the government. I'm really not sure who to trust or whose advice to take, because to me it seems like it changes daily. And funny enough is that those changes actually affect the economy. They affect cybersecurity. They affect a lot of things. During the pandemic, we all worked from home, and we no longer were we bringing our own device at BYOD, but we were bringing the company into our homes, and it put a lot of companies at risk. Did you see any after effects of that?
I mean, we're still seeing them all the time. Like, it's everybody's part of their network, and your crap at your house is going to the company. And I mean, your kids are doing stuff on your network, and you're VPN'd directly into the infrastructure. So, everybody's worried about, COVID spreading, but COVID is at least something that's controllable. When you're piped right in, whatever infection you have on your system, that's going right there. And it's, I've done so much IR and sort of work on with folks on getting past that. It's not going to end anytime soon. I am 1,000% confident there's a whole lot of companies out there that don't know that they've got something going on right now.
I can tell you firsthand that there's quite a few, because some of the IRs that I've looked at and some of the consulting I've done, going back to, through the logs and looking at the first interaction, was like a year. How do you not know that long? Working in a SOC and managing a SOC, we have an MDR and I manage that. And attacks like that, we're catching in like 2 hours. How is it that people can't detect that in a year? And that tells me they're either not following their security practices and security development lifecycle, or they're just not concerned. Like, one of the common denominators, I think, is a lot of these companies are smaller, and they have the idea of, it'll never happen to me. They see the ransomware and they see these big events on TV and they're like, oh, that's, those are big companies, not worried about it. Next thing you know, mom and pop get hit and they lose their business. And I think it's a shame. And I think we do need, active retribution on some of these ransomware gangs at some point, because we've gotten to a point where we just let them walk all over us, and if you pay the ransom, they're going to come right back to you. I've seen double extortion where a company pays ransom, they get their shit unlocked, and then the gang comes back a month later and does it again. So you're not even guaranteed to even have your network unencrypted. They're just running like the Wild Wild West. They have no consequences whatsoever.
No, I mean, it's the best retirement plan you can have. You're that's why I don't remember which group it was, but I saw one of the heads of it had his wedding, and they gave away a Ferrari as a door prize at his wedding. Yeah. So I mean,
that's shocking.
Yeah,
I'm in the wrong business.
I was going to say, if I wasn't a good guy, I could make a lot of money as a bad guy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been studying a lot, doing research and practicing attacks on old methods of attack, like RF. Being a T brancher, I love RF, and there's nothing more efficient than compromising something that's driven by RF, because a lot of companies have no measures whatsoever to protect against RF attacks. And look at GSM and cell phones and the things that we can do with cell phones that would just blow your mind. I did a talk in Oklahoma, and just recently, and I was telling people how, I can get on your phone, open up an app, take a screenshot, download that screenshot of your two-factor authentication app, and then compromise your account. And they were just shocked that you could do that. And I said that, that little device you hold in the palm of your hand can actually take people to the moon. There's a lot of power in those little devices. And a lot of people don't understand that the threat of the mobile landscape. And I think that we're going to start seeing a lot more ransomware attacks on a carrier level as far as communications go.
Yeah, 5G. I mean, it's most 5G is already in a compromised state, and it's 5G is again another one of those faster is not better, and we can't go rip out and start from scratch. So I'm in the same boat as you. Like, I think that's a vector that's going to become much more realistic. Outages and DOSes and those types of things at region levels.
Yeah, definitely. And RF is just so much fun. And it's crazy that people don't actually get on the internet and do a bit of research and see the type of attacks you can carry out with just a simple hack RF kit, and they're effective. And if you really want to exfiltrate data out of a network, use RF. Nobody will ever find out. And there's easy ways to do it. So what is your passion outside of cybersecurity? What do you like to do when you're not neck deep in cyber and all the political stuff?
I play golf a lot. I lift weights. I like those two things because I like to compete with myself. I've never been a fan of team sports because I don't like to have that easy out of blaming somebody else when my day sucks. Like, if you're playing bad golf, it's because you're playing bad golf. If you're not able to push the weight, it's something with you. I just get it's a good way, I think, for mentally, right, for me. And I had a health scare this year, so I'm trying to take some more time and not work nonstop. And it's when the weather gets back to being good again, be out on the course more.
Cool. Yeah, I've tried golf a couple times, but golf doesn't necessarily agree with me. I'm no good. Once it gets to the green, I'm screwed.
Yeah.
I can drive, but once it gets to the green, forget it. So a question off topic, being that we're both from Corey Station alum, Big Daddies. You ever go to Big Daddies?
Yeah, I mean, if you've been to Corey Station, everybody's been there.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. It was funny because I was training for a fight down. I was a pro boxer for a while, and was training on the base, and went to Big Daddy's and met Roy Jones Jr. Ended up training in his gym for a while.
Right. He lives down there.
Yeah, in Pensacola. Yeah, so it's pretty cool. I met with him, and then they started doing tough man contests, and I was working corners at Big Daddy's, helping the guys train because they wouldn't let me compete, but it was fun to help those guys out. But yeah, Big Daddy's is legendary when it comes to CTs going to school in Quarry Station.
Yeah.
That and there was a place downtown in Pensacola. I can't remember the name of it. That was connected to a piano bar, and then it
Yeah,
had
it's the Seville Quarter.
Seville Quarter. Yeah, many nights in Seville Quarter.
Stumbled through that place a few times.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, things like that. I miss those days. I look back at some of the people that I went to school with and what they're doing now, and they're all doing the same work that we're doing. It seemed like everybody transitioned from being CTs into the cyber industry, which is really important too. I think that as an industry goes, we're basically powered and fueled by a lot of veterans. I think a lot of the leaders in our space, come from the military, and I think I think it's great. I've been on a couple of veteran podcasts. Was on one with Jack Scott, and veterans in cybersecurity do so much for the industry, and it lead a lot of it. So where do you think that we could go, or what direction do you think we should go to make our industry better? What's your biggest complaint about our industry?
I mean, the biggest complaint that I have really is just the market dynamics that are taking place, like the valuations of technologies and companies that are getting thrown through the roof by these VCs when it's really not helping a lot of times, and it's just money for the sake of money, and it just drives things in the wrong direction. I think we need more strategy, less tech, that type of thing. And I think the one thing that drives me bonkers outside of the market is that we don't punish negligence when we know what negligence is. I think that there should be CEOs and CISOs that are in a 6x9 cell, and the fact that they get to walk with a multi-million-dollar payday makes me rage. Like if you're a CISO and you're getting $1 million a year salary and you have a passwordless server on the internet, you should go to jail.
Exactly. Or you haven't patched for vulnerability that's like 10 years old.
That's negligence. We know what negligence is. You can't do it in the airline industry. Why can you do it in cyber?
Exactly. And we're getting to a point as an industry too, where the FBI is even helping people out, breaking into their servers and patching for them, which I thought was a really unique situation. You consider that breaking the law, or being a Robin Hood and trying to help out? Like I still have a hard time wrapping my head around what they did and what I did, and I was facing charges and they were helping out. Like I don't know, it's confusing, and yeah. I think that as cyber law goes, I think a lot of cyber law is very confusing.
Title 10 authority, beautiful thing.
Yeah, right. So last question before we wrap things up. If you could have your perfect career or your perfect job, your ideal job that you would go home every day and feel fulfilled, what would that be?
I think I have it now. I'm pretty jazzed about the work I do and the people I get to work with, and the fact that it seems to matter, and that I think that there's some difference being made. The only thing I wish I could do more of is work with the folks that need more of the help, right? Because this is a demand-driven space, and I've done a lot of pro bono stuff. I did some stuff recently for like a battered women's shelter, that type of thing. I'd love to do more of that, but there's only so many hours in the day, and there's so many folks that need assistance. You have to pick and choose. So I wish if I was to have more perfect, I had more time to do more work.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm pretty much the same. I really love my job and who I work with, and the type of stuff I do, because not only do I manage the MDR, but I work on the red team. I also do incident response. I get a chance to see all of it and not just a very siloed piece of it. I think to make the industry better, I think more people need that experience. I think they need to see the IRs. I think they need to be involved in other companies' IRs and be part of a red team. That way they can see the effect of every part of cybersecurity. And then maybe then they'll take things like patching seriously. But I think we're a ways off from that. Well, Chase, I want to thank you for coming on the show and agreeing to meet with me. It's been a pleasure. And you're welcome back anytime. And thanks for spending an hour of my birthday with me. Yeah, that's really cool. Any last words, questions for me or the group?
Well, number one, happy birthday. Number two,
Thanks.
always good to talk to another CT. So, thanks for having me on. Great work, and look forward to chatting with you again in the future. Stay safe.
Absolutely. You too. All right, guys. Until next episode, be safe and be kind to each other. And I'll talk to you then. Thanks again, Chase.